In the next 10 minutes, I'll show you Lost Colony ratholes that are so good, no one will ever want to raid you. Hello to the crew and welcome back to another video on Ark Survival Ascended. Grab a bottle of water and let's get straight into it. Rathole number 1 is so stupid and broken that I simply claimed it on our cluster to build my own base. It is located at 15.4 and 74. Behind the obelisk in the wall around the crater. The entrance is small enough to block most creatures. Pteranodons, Desmodus and snow owls are the only creatures that can fit through with a little skill. However, it is still extremely difficult for your opponents to fly into the entrance because it is so narrow that snow owls and Desmodus always have to land on the ground before they can fly into the cave. The first large room is perfect for a huge number of turrets that can all face the entrance. There is a sloped area in the back of the room which faces the entrance perfectly. This means you can place a couple of turrets that face the entrance and shoot down any opponent in seconds. At the back there is a very small crouch part, which is not really strong or useful, but it can be defended very well with 1 or 2 turrets. Overall, I think that this spot is rarely built because it is very unknown. At the same time, it is one of the best spots on the entire list. Bats do work in this spot, and unlike many other spots on Lost Colony, there is no 6 times damage. Whether you want to build a large crafting area and industrial forges, or you want to place your breeders in this rathole, there is enough space for a medium or large tribe. As people keep asking whether bats work in ratholes or don't, I added the information for each spot, if bats work and when I tested it. However, as this changes from time to time, please treat this information with caution and a grain of salt. Just because it works today does not mean it will still work in like 3 weeks. So please be careful with this information and check again before you build in any of these spots. Oh, and on a side note, as of I'm editing this, I'm at about 9k subs. If you could sub to help me reaching my goal of 20k subs by the end of the year, I would greatly appreciate it. The second spot is above the cave entrance at 83.5 and 74.4. At the top of the gate, directly above the entrance, it can only be accessed from one side by flying in with a grappling hook, Desmodus or snow owl. Not all areas are wide enough to get through, which makes the spot perfect for defending against other tribes. The spot is actually quite large, and medium-sized tribes can build in it with ease. The spot has 2 problems. Firstly, the cave is a Desmo cave, which means that many people are passing by to tame Desmos, so your enemies will find you quite fast. The second problem is that parts of the spot seem to have 6 times damage. The front part should be normal 1-time damage, but once your opponents are in your spot, it will be pretty hard to defend it. However, the ceiling is perfect for setting up turrets and ensuring that your opponents cannot enter your spot. Especially if you place tech turrets above the gap. It will be quite nasty to raid you, which makes the spot very strong despite the other problems. The windows in this spot are one way, which means you can see everything that is happening on the outside, but no one can look into your spot, which gives you good opportunities to react to your opponents, especially during raids. You actually should be careful and place your generator in the middle of the spot, or at least not at the edges. When testing, I sometimes manage to hit through the wall with the mech, which can damage structures when hitting them in the right angle. Whether you want to build a large crafting area and industrial forges, or you want to place your breeders in this rathole, there is enough space for a medium or larger tribe. The third rathole is actually pretty strong in the early game, when you need your first base spot. In the gap in the wall behind the statue at 13.5 and 26.2, you can easily build a small base that you can defend extremely well with 3 to 4 turrets. You actually can't stay here for long, because it's a Desmo cave, and enemies are constantly flying in and out. But especially for the first days, you can protect your loot and build a few crafting stations until you find a better spot. There's actually a slightly larger area in the lower part of the spot, where you could also build something or simply use it to bury your loot. But once the enemies are in this spot, it becomes rather difficult to defend the lower part, because you can simply drop in and destroy the turrets quite easily. This spot is more for small tribes. When I made the video shortly after the Lost Colony release, beds were still working. Sadly, there is only enough space for small tribes, and apart from a few Desmos, you will hardly be able to breed creatures in this spot, because it is simply too tight. The fourth spot is a small to medium-sized spot in the ceiling of the entrance of the crack at 2.4 and 28.2. There is space for a large starter base, where you can build all the crafting stations you need. This spot is actually extremely easy to defend, as it has a vertical entrance that is very safe to close off with some turrets, as you cannot simply tunnel into the spot. You won't be able to breed in this rathole, but it can house a couple of players, which means you can fit a medium-sized tribe in this rathole, but sadly you can only fit small creatures. However, the spot itself has enough space to build 2 levels, and you could build the entrance in such a way that if someone blows some of your foundations, walls will drop on the enemy, blocking the entrance again. I didn't manage to spawn in a bed here, which means you have to be careful, because if you die, you have to find your way back to this spot somehow. The fifth spot is super broken. It's located at 2.9 and 30.2, and the entrance is so narrow that only players can get in. At the same time, there is a wall in this spot where you can easily place a stupid amount of turrets so that they all shoot at the entrance when an opponent moves close to it. Neither Desmos, Trikes nor Snow Owls can fit through the crack, so this spot may not be the biggest, but it is one of the best. Raiding it is pretty painful. There is room for 3 to 4 players here, and it will be a little more difficult with creatures, but you could also bring 1 or 2 breeding pairs into this spot, if you don't mind it being a little cramped. Crafting stations all fit in, and if you build correctly, you can even place an industrial forge. I actually didn't manage to use beds in this spot, but I could imagine that there are places in the front part where beds work if you try hard and see if you can make it work. The spot is pretty well hidden and very few players actually know about it, so you're extremely safe here and can use it from the beginning to the end of a wipe. Spot number 6 has probably the longest crouch part in the entire game. It is located at 25.5 and 68.6, and it is so long that no one wants to raid this rathole. The spot itself is actually much smaller than it appears, but since the crouch part is so long and really easy to defend, the spot is really stupid and I wouldn't want to raid it. Neither flyers nor other creatures can get into this spot, and your only chance is to crouch and run through this corridor. Apart from the corridor, however, the rathole offers very little protection, and you have to be aware that the crouch part is your only defense. Actually, crafting stations, creatures and large tribes all fit in here, but you have to make sure you build in a way you get enough space. At the end of the crouch is a small space, where you can easily create a few areas with cliff platforms, which are great for building. I actually didn't manage to use beds in here, but the spot is pretty well hidden, super easy to defend, and very few players actually know about it. So you're extremely safe here and can use it for the beginning of a wipe, as there are some useful resources close. My spot number 7 is one of the better known spots, but I still wanted to include it in this list, because many people simply don't know this spot is much bigger than it seems, and it also has a pretty strong area that can only be accessed through a small, almost invisible crouch part. But first things first, the spot is located in the middle of the city of 36 and 53.6, and you can see it when you look at the crack in the floor under this large house. You could enter here with almost all flying creatures that spawn on the map, which means you also have to watch out for Desmos and Snow Owls when defending on some unofficial servers, but more about that later. The back wall of the building is very suitable for setting up turrets, and you can already build a pretty good base in the first room on the left. However, the area that everyone overlooks is on the right hand side, where you can crouch under the wall to get into the building next door. Although there are open spaces under the walls, they are not large enough to actually get in. You can only crouch from one building to the other. I don't know if this will be patched relatively quickly, but currently it's one of the biggest spots that is extremely easy to defend thanks to this crouch part. Since this spot is located in the city, the entire area is a no-fly zone and there are NPCs throughout the city that will potentially attack your opponents if they raid you. This means it will be extremely difficult to raid you without enough players and gear. The 8th red hole is a small to medium sized red hole at 13.2 and 35.2. It is super well suited for the early and mid game. Here, a small or medium tribe can build up quite well in the start of a wipe. The problem with this spot, however, is that it is also located in a death smoke cave, which makes it very easy to find, even though it is really difficult to see. Beds don't work here, but they can be placed further forward or elsewhere in the cave. Since the spot is quite high, it's difficult to tunnel into, but the most dangerous players are for sure those who want to bomb your base with Desmos. There's actually enough space for a crafting area or a small breeding area. You won't be able to fit everything into this red hole, but you can still store a large amount of stuff here. The spot is actually quite easy to defend, as the entrance is relatively small, and if you place turrets well, they can fire very effectively at the entrance, keeping all enemies outside. Yeah, it's time for another spot like this. My spot number 9 at 30.1 and 59.9 is right under the statue by the bridge, right up the Lost King's spot. You need one cliff platform to build at this spot, but once you've set it up, it's super easy to make a little space and then use the space in the statue's butt. There are several statues like that at this location, but only one has enough space in its butt to actually build underneath it. Beds work at this spot, and if you place the cliff well enough, you can almost build 2 floors on top of the cliff so that small to medium sized tribes can live here very easily. If you add turrets at the bottom of the cliff and defend the legs of the statue well enough on the inside, you can actually live here for quite a while. The spot is not very well known and is rarely scouted, which means you're actually pretty well hidden while still having a good amount of space. It is a little too small for an industrial forge, but beds work. Since the game considers the spot to be on the surface, there is only one-time damage, which makes it even stronger. All in all, it's a good spot for smaller tribes or if you need an outpost where you can place a teleporter. Since it is very close to the city, it is perfect for farming cursed loot or going on outpost missions. I regularly join servers and find that these spots are already built. So, once again, I have spots that you can use to secure your loot if you can't find any other spots. For example, you can use buildings in the city. Some of them simply don't have doors, which means they have a relatively small entrance that is easy to defend without anyone immediately seeing that someone is building inside. There isn't usually much space there, but it's often enough for a small crafting area and some loot. If the city isn't your thing, there are some waterfalls without water on the map where you can build. You're not really safe in these air pockets, but many people simply don't know about them. And from the outside, it's incredibly difficult to see if anyone is building there. Most of the time, these are the places that no one raids because you wouldn't expect there to be anything. The last spot hasn't the smallest entrance and a crouch part. It's not overly large and you can't breed creatures in here either. Doesn't sound very good, but that's exactly the trick. Spot number 10 at 10.2 and 61.7 is in the Aberration Cave on Lost Colony. You can't fly in most places here, and at the same time, the spot is in the middle of a radioactive zone. This means that anyone who wants to raid you can only do it with hazard suits, which makes it much more difficult to get into your base. Of course, it's extremely annoying for you to live here, because you always have to walk around in a suit. This makes the spot unsuitable for the early game, and also as a breeding base. But you could secure some loot here, or build your crafting areas once you have a teleporter. All in all, the spot is certainly not much fun to live in, but it's even less fun to raid it. Build a small turret wall with tech turrets, so that the hazard suits are shot down immediately. Beds don't work, and the cave also has 6 times damage, making the spot more difficult to defend, apart from the radioactivity. I hope you liked this video, and I'm thrilled to read if this video has helped you. Hit the like button, leave a comment below for the algorithm, and consider subbing to the channel. Alright, Frodo.